Greetings, my name is Jake, and I have been a polar expeditor for over 10 years. Antarctica has become my passion and the meaning of my life. Every time I step onto this icy continent, I feel excitement and awe. My job is to share these emotions with others by leading small groups of tourists on expeditions. 5 years ago, I started working with Elizabeth, an experienced expeditor who is 25 years older than me. She is an amazing woman whose energy and enthusiasm are contagious. Over the years of working together, we have become not just colleagues but close friends. We understood each other perfectly and could rely on each other in any situation. One day, Elizabeth invited me to her home for dinner. Her house was cozy and warm, filled with photos from expeditions and souvenirs from around the world. At dinner, I met Elizabeth's daughter, Alice. She was the complete opposite of her mother. Quiet, shy, with soft facial features and grace in her movements. We talked all evening, discussing books, travels, and dreams. I felt that there was a special connection between us, some inexplicable attraction. After that evening, Alice and I started seeing each other often. We walked in parks, went to museums and exhibitions, just talked for hours. I discovered new facets in her every time. Behind the external fragility was a strong and independent character, a sharp mind, and a subtle sense of beauty. Alice became a breath of fresh air for me, an outlet from the harsh everyday life of a polar explorer. Gradually, our friendship grew into something more. We became closer, our relationship filled with warmth and tenderness. I realized that I was falling in love with Alice, with her inner beauty and purity. When I confessed my feelings to her, she just smiled and said that she had been waiting for these words for a long time. Our romance developed rapidly. We became practically inseparable, spending every free minute together. Elizabeth was very happy for us and supported our relationship in every way. She said that we were a perfect couple and that she had long dreamed of such a reliable and loving life partner for her daughter. A year after the beginning of our romance, Alice and I got married. It was the happiest day of my life. Looking into Alice's shining eyes, standing next to me at the altar, I realized that I had found a real treasure, my soulmate. I was ready to do anything for her happiness and well-being. Our family life was like a fairy tale. We were so in love, so happy together, that it seemed nothing could darken our idyll. Even my work, which required long absences and was associated with risk, could not separate us. Alice always waited for me, supporting and inspiring me. Elizabeth was also happy for us. She said that now she could be calm about her daughter's future, knowing that there was a reliable and loving man next to her. We continued to work together as before, but now our relationship reached a new level of trust and understanding. I thought it would always be like this, that our family union was unbreakable and friendship with Elizabeth was eternal. I couldn't even imagine what trials fate had in store for us and how one reckless act could destroy everything we had built over the years. Our life together with Alice flowed smoothly and harmoniously, despite my frequent absences. Every time I returned from an expedition, I eagerly anticipated meeting my beloved wife. Alice always greeted me with a radiant smile and a tight hug, surrounding me with care and attention. We dreamed of children, planned for the future. I wanted us to have a big and friendly family, for our children to grow up in an atmosphere of love and understanding. Alice shared my aspirations and always supported me in all my endeavors. My work with Elizabeth was also going well. We organized more and more expeditions, conquering the most remote corners of Antarctica. Our tandem was so close-knit and effective that we began to be called the Polar Duo. We understood each other perfectly, could rely on each other in any situation. But during one field season, everything changed. Elizabeth and I took a group of tourists to a particularly difficult and dangerous area of Antarctica. The weather conditions were extremely unstable, but we were confident in our strength and experience. On the third day of the expedition, we were caught in a fierce snowstorm. The wind was so strong that it knocked us off our feet. Visibility dropped to almost zero. Elizabeth and I understood the gravity of the situation. We were responsible not only for our own lives, but also for the lives of our clients. We did everything possible to preserve heat and ensure the safety of the group. We constantly checked the tent's fastenings, monitored the tourists' condition, saved fuel and food. But the forces of nature seemed inexhaustible. On the second night of the storm, Elizabeth and I found ourselves in the same tent. We clung to each other, trying to keep warm. We snuggled into all available sleeping bags and blankets. The tension of the situation, fear and adrenaline mixed with some kind of primitive survival instinct. I don't know what came over me at that moment. Maybe it was the fatigue and stress of the last few days. Maybe it was Elizabeth's closeness, her warmth and smell, which contrasted so much with the icy breath of Antarctica. But at some point, I pulled her to me and kissed her. It was an impulse, a moment of weakness that I later bitterly regretted. But then, in that tent, choking with passion and desire, I didn't think about anything. We made love as if it was the last time in our lives, forgetting about everything in the world. When the storm finally subsided and we were able to continue on our way, a tense silence hung between Elizabeth and me. We avoided looking each other in the eye, communicating only when necessary. The weight of what had happened pressed down on us with an invisible burden. Returning home, I didn't know how to look Alice in the eye. Feelings of guilt and shame were eating me up from the inside. I had betrayed my beloved wife, my vows of fidelity, and for what? For a fleeting passion, a flash of adrenaline. I tried to act as if nothing had happened, but Alice immediately sensed the change in me. She tried to get me to talk, to understand what had happened, but I only kept silent and evaded the answer. Our relationship became strained, filled with understatement and alienation, and meanwhile my attraction to Elizabeth only intensified. I tried to fight it, to remind myself of duty and honor, but as soon as I was alone with her, all my good intentions evaporated. We began to meet secretly, snatching moments of intimacy between expeditions and family obligations. Every time after our meetings, I felt like the worst scoundrel. I didn't recognize myself, my actions and desires. How could I do this to Alice, to our love? How could I betray everything that was dear to me? But at the same time, I was irresistibly drawn to Elizabeth. Our relationship was full of passion, risk, some kind of desperate recklessness. We understood that we were playing with fire, but we couldn't stop. Chapter 3. This double deception could not last forever. With each passing day, the tension grew. Alice started asking more and more questions for which I had no answers. I got confused in my testimony, made up ridiculous excuses for my absences and delays. Our once happy marriage was cracking at the seams. Elizabeth was also not satisfied with the state of affairs. She hinted that she was tired of secret meetings and wanted more. It seemed unfair to her that we had to hide and pretend to be just colleagues. She didn't understand why I was hesitating with the decision, why I couldn't choose between her and Alice. And I was torn between two fires, torn by conflicting feelings. On the one hand, there was love and devotion to Alice, the vows made before the altar. On the other hand, there was an irresistible passion for Elizabeth, the attraction of the forbidden fruit. I felt trapped, with no way out. The denouement came suddenly, like a bolt from the blue. One evening when I returned home, I found Alice in tears. In her hands, she was clutching my phone, on the screen of which were open messages from Elizabeth, leaving no doubt about the nature of our relationship. I stood there, as if struck by lightning, unable to utter a word. In Alice's eyes, I saw pain, resentment, and disappointment. The pain of betrayal by a loved one, disappointment in the one she trusted unconditionally. She threw accusations and questions in my face, to which I had no answer. How could I? Why? Don't our love and our family mean anything to me? I tried to justify myself, to explain, but the words sounded pathetic and unconvincing. And what could I say? That I got carried away with another woman, forgetting about my marital duty? That I betrayed our feelings and had been deceiving all this time? Any explanation seemed insignificant in the face of the grief I had caused to the closest person to me. That night, I left the house, slamming the door. I needed to be alone, to sort out my feelings and thoughts. I wandered the night streets, not knowing where I was going, tormented by guilt and self-flagellation. How could I let this happen? How could I ruin my family, cause pain to my beloved wife? For the next few weeks, my life turned into hell. I went to work, mechanically performing my duties, but my thoughts were far away. I couldn't find a place for myself, tormented by thoughts of Alice and our future. Only in Antarctica, among the icy expanses, did I feel some semblance of peace. I tried to avoid Elizabeth. Our relationship after that conversation became purely business, devoid of even a shadow of the former closeness. We communicated only on work issues, and each such conversation was torture for me. Months passed, and there was no word from Alice. It was as if she had dissolved, disappeared from my life. I didn't know where she was or what was happening to her. I was going crazy with worry and uncertainty. Only a short message from her friend gave me hope. Alice was okay. She had just left to be alone with herself. I tried to move on, tried to come to terms with the situation. I immersed myself in work, taking on the most difficult and dangerous expeditions. Risk became a kind of drug for me, a way to forget, not to think about pain and loss. But one day something happened that fundamentally changed the situation, something that made me take a fresh look at my life and make a difficult decision. Chapter 4. After all the proceedings and trials, I was suspended from work. My reputation was hopelessly tarnished. I was branded as the culprit of the tragedy. No one wanted to deal with a failed guide who had allowed the death of clients. I was left without a job, without a family, without a purpose in life. The days dragged on in an endless succession, gray and joyless. I almost never left the house, avoided people, feeling sorry for myself and everyone around me. One evening there was a knock at the door. On the doorstep stood Sarah, the wife of one of the dead climbers. We had met at the trials, but never communicated personally. It was too hard, too painful to look into the eyes of a person whose life I had destroyed. But Sarah did not come to accuse. She said she wanted to talk, to understand, and I let her in, feeling a strange relief that I could finally open up to someone. We talked all night. I told her about that day, about my mistakes and doubts, about the burden of guilt that had been weighing on me all this time. And Sarah listened without interrupting, and in her eyes I saw not condemnation, but sympathy and understanding. Towards morning she said, "You know, I was angry with you for a long time. I blamed you for everything, hated you. But then I realized you are also a victim of circumstances. You didn't want this to happen, and now you are punishing yourself more than anyone else." Her words were a revelation to me. It was as if someone had turned on the light in a dark room, and I suddenly saw the situation from a different angle. Yes, I made a mistake. Yes, my arrogance led to tragedy. But does conscious self-torture and inaction correct what happened? Will the grief and pain I caused myself and others bring back the dead? Sarah suggested I start a new life, not forgetting the past, but also not allowing it to destroy the present and the future. She told me about the charitable foundation she had created in memory of her deceased husband. The foundation helped the families of climbers and polar explorers who were injured or died during expeditions. Sarah invited me to join, to become a part of this cause. For me, it became a ray of hope, a chance for redemption. I immersed myself in the work of the foundation. My task was to share experiences, talk about the risks and dangers of polar expeditions, and teach safety techniques. I wanted my story to be a warning to others so that my mistakes would not be repeated. Working at the foundation helped me to take a fresh look at many things. I saw how many people around me had experienced loss and tragedy, but they did not give up. They found the strength to move on, to help others. This inspired and gave hope. Gradually, I began to come to my senses. The pain and guilt did not go away, but now I had a purpose for which it was worth living. I knew that I had to do everything possible to prevent tragedies like the one that happened to me from happening again. And yet, despite the positive changes, there was an emptiness in my life. An emptiness that was once filled by Alice and our family. I often thought about her, wanted to talk, to explain myself, but each time I stopped myself, remembering her request not to seek meetings, fate decided otherwise. One day I ran into Alice on the street, accidentally, unexpectedly. We both froze, not knowing how to react. But then she smiled, timidly, uncertainly. And that smile became a sign for me that not all was lost. We began to communicate cautiously. At first, just as friends, sharing news and events. I told her about my work at the foundation, about how it helped me start a new life. Alice had changed too. She had become calmer, wiser. The tragedy and our divorce made her rethink a lot of things. Gradually, our communication became warmer, more trusting. We recalled the happy moments of our life together, shared our experiences and hopes. I realized that my feelings for Alice had not gone anywhere, that I wanted to be with her, despite everything. The decision came naturally. I offered Alice to start all over again, not from scratch, but taking into account everything we had experienced. I promised that I would never repeat my past mistakes, that family would always come first for me. And Alice agreed to give us a second chance. We started all over again. Carefully, step by step, building a relationship, learning to trust each other, to forgive, to value every moment together. It wasn't easy, there were ups and downs, but we managed because we knew that our love was worth fighting for. Life was gradually getting better. Work at the foundation was satisfying, and my relationship with Alice was getting stronger day by day. I felt that I had finally found my place, my purpose, but the past did not let go. One day Elizabeth called me. For the first time in a long time, I heard her voice, and it seemed alien and distant to me. She said she was leaving polar expeditions forever, and that before leaving she wanted to meet, to say goodbye. I hesitated. On the one hand, it seemed to me that this meeting would change nothing, only reopen old wounds. On the other hand, I felt that I had to close this chapter of my life, put an end to our relationship. We met in the park, the same one where I once told her about my decision to keep my family. Elizabeth looked different, older, tired. In her eyes, I saw the same pain and bitterness that had tormented me all this time. We talked about the past, about our work, our feelings, our mistakes. Elizabeth admitted that for a long time she had blamed me for what happened, considered me a traitor. But now she understood. Each of us made our own choice, and for that choice, we must take responsibility. I also opened up to her. I told her about my experiences, about my work at the foundation, about my new life with Alice. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that there was no more unsaid between us, no secrets or resentments. We were just two people who had gone through hard times and were trying to move on. As we said goodbye, Elizabeth hugged me. There was no passion or love in that embrace, only the warmth of human participation and understanding. We parted peacefully, without regrets or grudges. Each of us went our own way. After this meeting, I felt that I had finally let go of the past. Everything that had happened, the mistakes, the losses, the worries, was left behind. The future was ahead, unknown but full of hope. Alice and I decided to leave the city, to start life from scratch. I found a job with the rescue service, teaching young guys how to survive in extreme conditions. Alice took up writing, sharing stories about overcoming difficulties and finding oneself. Gradually, our lives were filled with new colors. We traveled, met new people, discovered uncharted horizons, and most importantly, we were together, supporting and inspiring each other. Of course, the past still reminded us of itself. There were moments of sadness and doubt, nightmares and bouts of guilt. But now I knew that no matter what happened, I had support. Alice's love, the support of friends, my own strength of spirit, all this helped to move forward. The years passed, life changed. Alice and I became parents, first of one child, then of another. Caring for the children, their upbringing and development became the main meaning of our lives. I continued to work in the rescue service, but now not in the field, but as a coordinator and mentor. I shared my experience, taught young people not only survival skills, but also life wisdom, the ability to make decisions and take responsibility for them. Work at the foundation also did not stop. Together with Sarah and other volunteers, we organized seminars, meetings, and supported those who had gone through loss and tragedy. For me, it was not just a social burden, but also a way not to forget my mistakes, to pay a debt of memory to the dead. From time to time, I thought of Elizabeth. I wondered how her life had turned out. Had she found her happiness, her path? These thoughts were not painful, rather detached and curious. The past had let me go, remaining only a memory, a lesson in life. Alice and I had come a long way. There were ups and downs, moments of absolute happiness and periods of doubt. But we learned to listen to each other, to respect each other's feelings and desires. Our love had become mature, conscious, having survived the test of time. Despite leaving active polar activity, the thirst for adventure did not go away. My family and I often traveled, showing the children the world. But now these were not extreme expeditions, but educational trips, trekking, acquaintance with nature and cultures. Once we went to Antarctica as a family, not as part of a commercial expedition, but as private tourists. I wanted to show the children this amazing place, to tell them about my former work, about the beauty and danger of the polar regions. Standing on the deck of the ship and looking at the endless icy expanses, I suddenly realized that I had come to harmony with myself and the world. All doubts, fears, guilt, all remained in the past. I accepted myself as I am, with all my strengths and weaknesses, victories and mistakes. Next to me stood Alice and our children. I hugged them, feeling endless gratitude to fate for this moment, for these people next to me. In the end, it was the love and support of loved ones that helped me go through all the trials and find my place in life. I realized that no matter what happened in the past, the main thing is how we will use the present. And I chose to live fully, consciously, gratefully accepting each new day. After all, life, despite all the difficulties and losses, is still beautiful and amazing. Conclusion. My story does not end there. There are still many discoveries, achievements, joys, and sorrows ahead. But I know that no matter what the future brings, I have the strength and support to meet it with dignity. Fate has taught me many lessons. I have known the pain of loss, the price of mistakes, the weight of responsibility. But I also learned to value every moment of life, to cherish loved ones, to be honest with myself and others. My main discovery was that life is not a competition or a pursuit of achievement. The main thing is the people around us, those we love and who love us. Family, friends, like-minded people. This is the real wealth that makes us truly happy. I am grateful to fate for all the trials I have gone through. They made me stronger, wiser, taught me compassion and understanding. Without them, I would not have become who I am now. My story is not a lesson or a call to follow my example. It's just the story of a man who once stumbled, lost himself, but found the strength to get up and move on. If it inspires someone, helps to rethink their life and attitude towards it, then it was not in vain. I look to the future with hope and faith. Faith in myself, in my loved ones, in the fact that the world, despite all the difficulties, is still beautiful. And each new day is a chance to make it a little better, a chance that I'm not going to miss.